He slid the safe key across the walnut table and said,
I only did it because I thought you were too old to handle the business anymore.
In that moment, the weight of betrayal cut deeper than any blade I'd held in my shop. My own son, the boy I taught to read the grain of wood, had read me as weak and traded trust for signatures forged behind my back. That wound would not heal with time. It would demand justice, and it would demand proof. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I have lived long enough to know the way wood talks back if you cut it wrong. It shivers, it sings, it warns before the grain tears. At 66, my days are measured in boards planed smooth and mornings that smell like sap and coffee. I am Michael Carver. Mike to the people who watched me fail and try again, widower, father, and reluctant retiree from Carver Timberworks, the shop my grandfather raised, and my hands kept standing. The shop sits on the backside of Asheville, near the French Broad. After Nora died, I stepped away from foreman's bark and left our boy Ethan the keys and the headaches. I kept what I could bear to keep, the right to read big contracts with a pencil, to count figures slowly, to pick lumber worthy of the word heritage. The crew humored me. Sawdust turns everyone's hair the same gray. Home is the cedar-clad place we built when Ethan was 5 and money was thin but courage abundant. It faces east, all windows in mourning, with a porch that swallows rocking chairs and a doormat stitched by Nora's sister that has refused to quit for 28 winters. I like the house the way I like an old mallet, balanced, honest, weight where it should be. When wind goes through the chimney, the living room answers like a low cello. Sundays were our tether. Ethan brought my granddaughter Quinn and a bag of apples. My daughter-in-law Sloan brought energy you could bottle. I didn't always know what to do with her light ring or how a person could talk to 10,000 strangers and still call it dinner, but she hugged me quick, called me dad, and filled the kitchen with the confidence of big city ideas. Ethan stood between us smiling, a bridge I believed could hold. At the center of that house sits a walnut table I joined with drawboard mortises the year Ethan turned 10. Its top is tattooed with birthdays and spilled varnish and one crescent. Where he carved his initials after a Braves game, we stayed up too late to finish. When I wipe it down, I talk to Nora. Sometimes I hear her laugh in the radiator or the oven door. "Keep it simple, Mike," she liked to say. "Let the grain be the grain." Even at half speed, the shop needed me enough to keep my back from rusting. 3 mornings a week, I ran my palm along fresh milled cherry. We had a waiting list for porch swings and paneled libraries, the kind of work that treats time as a partner. Ethan had a knack for proposals and for turning my scrawls into tidy renderings. He said we could scale. I said we shouldn't scale past what the wood allows. When autumn came, orders doubled as the tourists thinned. A developer from Denver called about reclaimed heart pine. I flew west for 2 days to breathe warehouse dust and argue board feet. The trip felt ordinary, the sort that keeps the old man out of the crew's way. I ate an omelet at a counter where the waitress called me honey and thought how the world stays the same if you sit still long enough. If there were cracks in our planks, I did not see them. Sloan had started a community series filming artisans and farmers against sunlit wood. She said the shop was a brand story and that audiences craved authenticity. I nodded and tried not to complain when a camera showed up near the finishing bench. "It helps us," Ethan would say. "Trust me." I trusted him because trust is how fathers sleep. The Blue Ridge wore its first blue of cold the day I came home. The pilot banked low and I watched the river notch the town into bright and shadow. I held my carry-on like a lunch pail and thought about the slab of maple I'd been saving for Quinn's first desk. The gate agent mispronounced my name. A child cried the pitch of a table saw winding down. Driving from the airport, I took the long road past the farmer's stand where Nora used to point out stubborn tomatoes. I could picture the porch light waiting, the kettle's whistle, the soft click of my shop shoes on the hallway. The house existed in my head like a chord I could hum. If I had known what waited, I might have parked under the moon a little longer and listened for the boards breathing. A home is not drywall and shingles. It is a set of promises under a roof, that a table will keep your elbows, that a chair will remember your spine, that a photograph can face a year of sunlight and not blink. I had promised to hold the line on those dignities. I believed Ethan knew the tune. I believed Sloane did too, or would learn it in time. My flight was late. Frost had silvered the grass by the time I turned up the drive. Gravel spoke under the tires. The porch light was off. I thought the bulb had failed. I reached for my keys and for a feeling I kept like a lucky coin, the certainty that what I loved would be where I had left it. The porch light should have been a little lighthouse at the end of my gravel tide, but it was dark, a blank coin where warmth should have glowed. Frost feathered the railings. My breath made a small weather front in front of my face while the keys clicked against Nora's old brass fob. Even the lock turned different, as if the door had learned a new accent while I was gone. When the latch gave, a smell rushed me, wet latex and citrus solvent, so clean it erased what had lived here before. Wood smoke, coffee, a whisper of lemon oil Nora favored for the walnut table. The lights inside weren't lights I knew. They were a hard retail white that shaved the corners off the room and left every surface with no place to hide. I stepped in because where else does a man go when his name is on the deed? And the floor under my boots flashed pale like bone. The ceiling had been dropped, boxed into straight lines that denied the roof's old ribcage. The riverstone hearth I had laid by hand was gone, replaced by a wall that looked like a phone screen, smooth and stainless, no place for flame. Our oak cabinetry, the set I'd milled from boards that cupped like stubborn hands, had vanished, swapped for gleaming panels, with edges too sharp to belong to any meal. The floor had been bleached to a white that hurt, like someone had tried to turn time itself into showroom plank and almost succeeded. "Surprise!" Sloane stood dead center, mic clipped to her sweater, ring light haloed behind her. The lens looked at me like a new landlord. We wrapped right on time. Ethan slid into view a step behind, his smile narrow and hopeful. We talked about this. It's an investment in the family brand. I listened for the house's answer and heard none. A home that had always hummed like a tuned box was silent, as if the strings had been loosened and tucked away. On the wall opposite the not fireplace, Nora's guitar hung under a neon outline shaped like a conversation bubble. Its wood looked thirsty. My hand found the nearest cabinet pull out of habit. The new finish was slick, without pores, a surface that refused fingerprints because it refused memory. I thought of the oak doors I had mortised until midnight one Christmas so Nora wouldn't have to look at plywood for another year. How her laugh had filled the kitchen like steam when she woke to them. "This is my house," I said, and the words felt smaller than they used to. Mine and Nora's. "It's the Carver family home," Sloane answered, voice bright but polished. Audience expectations are high after the first teaser. We needed to align aesthetics and experience. Ethan touched my arm barely. "Dad, trust me." Trust. The word did what winter does to old joints, made them ache with weather you can't see. I let my eyes travel the perimeter like a carpenter checking for level. The mantel where Nora lined up school pictures had no successor. The mantel was a memory of a mantel. My own steps sounded new, as if the floor had forgotten my weight. "Basement key," I said. "Where is it?" "We optimized the lower level," Sloane said, turning slightly so the mic could hear her better. "It's our studio now. Improved acoustics, controlled lighting, safety protocols, locked while we're setting up." "What happened to my bench?" I asked. "To the vices on the south wall." "Legacy footprint didn't serve the content," she said, "but we preserved select heirloom elements for storytelling." She meant props. My hands remembered the maple vice jaws better than they remembered my own birthday, and I pictured them unscrewed, labeled, leaned somewhere like old relatives in borrowed chairs. Viewers love the transformation arc, she added. It honors where you've been and inspires where we're going. This room had once made a space for November. The stone held heat, the lamplight gave corner shape, the walnut table absorbed elbows, arguments, and the damp of orchard apples. From where I stood, I could see one crescent scar at the table's edge. The night Ethan carved a wrong letter and cried, convinced the table would never forgive him. I had shown him how wood can be patient if you are, how you steam and sand and let it breathe. The scar stayed anyway, softer but faithful, a small moon that kept our tides. Now everything had been sanded past story into an idea of modern. Even the air sounded edited with the tiny hiss of dimmers and fans. The ring light blinked while Sloane tapped her phone, a little son deciding whether to rise again. The house waited to see what I would be in the scene. Where did the hearth go, I asked, though the answer was a design plan somewhere. Opened the sightlines, Sloane said. More inclusive flow. A fire gathers a family by teaching them where to sit. Without it, the room felt borderless, like a field after snow. I could feel the mountain night leaning against the windows, trying to remember how to enter. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice low enough to stay off the tape, did we agree to this? We agreed to moving forward, he said, to not getting stuck. There was a new picture frame on the shelf, metal, blank, waiting for a photo that hadn't lived long enough to deserve printing. In the frame of the window, the outlines of the Pisgah Ridge stood like witnesses. Trust me, he had said. Once upon a time, that sentence lowered my shoulders and sent me to sleep. Tonight, it felt like a nail set a hair too deep. I walked to Nora's guitar and touched the headstock. Under the neon, it felt like visiting someone in a hospital who still sounds like themselves, but not quite. We'll make you proud, Sloane said. The community's ready. I nodded to no one and to everyone who ever ate at our table. There are moments when a man chooses between shouting and listening for what has gone missing. I took inventory like a foreman at shift change. Hearth gone, ceiling lowered, floors bleached, cabinetry replaced, basement sealed. Also gone, the porch light. Also altered, the rule that a house is allowed to keep its own smell. Tomorrow, I said, mostly to the floor, I'll check the shop and the books. The ring light flickered, undecided, then went dark. Outside, the ridge line held its breath. Inside, the new walls kept their bright, practiced smile, and I stood where the fire used to be and tried to hear the old room breathe. Morning came, thin and chemical. The house smelled like the inside of a paint can, not like coffee and ash and lemon oil. I boiled water anyway, stubborn as a mule, and poured it through Nora's old metal cone. The brew took on a faint tang of solvent that a man with less pride might have poured down the sink. I drank it because routine is a handrail when the stairs shift under you. Frost slid off the eaves in slow peels. The silence in those bright, corrected rooms felt like a stranger who had picked my name out of a hat. I carried my mug to the small office off the hallway, the one with the window that used to frame the chimney. The desk was nicked where Quinn's crayons once defied the paper. I pulled open the drawer where I kept the ledger books. Cloth spines, pencil rulings, the steady comfort of columns that behaved. The drawer was light. Inside, a plastic sleeve with a post-it in Sloane's handwriting that said digitized. Ask me for access. The smiley felt like a thumb in my sternum. Paper gives off a smell like bread when you turn it. A cloud has no smell at all. I booted the old desktop, the one a cousin had called antique, and found an email with new credentials. The admin for Carver Timberworks accounting suite was Sloane. I signed in on a sub-account that still remembered me. The dashboard came up like a face I didn't know, clean and eager. Expenses scrolled past, lumber, freight, insurance, and then a category that had multiplied since spring, Blue Ridge Heritage Fund. 6 months of transfers, steady and round, 5,000, 10, sometimes 15. Descriptions said CSR, it's Community Heritage Outreach. No matching invoices. In the signature panel, a tidy stamp glowed green, DocuSign by MC completed. I know the muscle memory of my name. When I sign, I notch the C low and pull the R long because that's how my father taught me to keep a line from climbing a page. The digital scribble on the screen had none of that stubborn lean. I clicked the audit trail. Timestamps clustered on Saturdays and Sunday afternoons, the hours I usually spent at a friend's pasture outside town where the cell signal gives up at the fence line. IP addresses resolved to a block near our own street. The pattern sat there like a knot telegraphing its presence to the blade. You can ignore a knot, you cannot claim surprise when the board splits. I dialed the landline that still belonged to May, our bookkeeper since Ethan was in middle school. Her hello was small, like she'd been waiting for a particular phone to ring. Sloan restructured, she said after I asked, voice trying to be cheerful and failing. Said we needed to modernize. My role's honorary now. I mostly get the newsletters. I pictured May's tidy desk with the ceramic sparrow and the ledger pencil sharpened with a knife. I pictured it covered by a clean blank laptop where every number is glossy and none smell like anything. I took my coat and drove downtown. Asheville wears mornings with a kind of bruised grace. The cafe Ethan liked was steamed up and humming. I waited with a napkin under my cup, counting the grooves milled into the tabletop by years of elbows. Ethan came in from the street with cold still on his cheeks, gave me that quick sun smile. I asked what the fund was for. He said brand stewardship and it's real good for optics. And, Dad, you signed the authorizations. He kept his eyes on the foam a second too long. I said, I don't sign above a limit without ink. He said soft, times change. We didn't stay long. Public rooms do not deserve private arguments. The walnut table sat where it had always sat, stubborn as a stump in a flood. I ran my fingers over the small crescent scar at the edge and then let my palm fall to the new lacquered cabinet face across the room. Wood with pores can talk to a house. The panel under my hand refused conversation. It was a mirror for a world that wanted its own reflection. That was the difference I kept circling. Grain versus gloss, weight versus theater, ledger versus brochure. The words Blue Ridge Heritage tried to borrow respect the way fake antiques borrow patina. My mind did a joiner's thing and began to lay out the cuts. No counter invoice meant a compliance problem. A signature I didn't make meant a fraud problem. A fund that fed itself without receipts meant a laundering risk dressed up in local goodwill. And the most dangerous cut of all, the control line had been moved when I wasn't looking. That wasn't an accounting issue. That was a boundary issue with a lock on it. I wrote by hand because I needed the scratch of pencil to prove I still existed. List, print statements, capture the audit logs, note every IP block and timestamp, request original DocuSign certificates, schedule an in-person with our bank manager, no emails, no calls that can be forwarded. Another line, dinner with Ethan and Sloan, somewhere noisy enough that no one confuses heat with light. Keep it simple, Nora whispered from some remembered kitchen doorway. Simple does not mean easy. It means square cuts, faces flush, glue where glue will hold. When I closed the laptop, a sound ticked through the house, a faint, intermittent chatter from the neon speech bubble above Nora's guitar, electrical teeth clicking. Daylight had gone flat on the ridge, the windows held a picture of the mountain like a postcard, too bright to be true. I slid the notes into the inside pocket of the denim jacket that has outlived 3 winters and a marriage and carried dishes to the sink because hands do better with work than with fists. I didn't make a speech to the empty room. I counted my steps to the kettle and back, dug the bank card out of my wallet, and set it by the door. Tomorrow we would start where proof lives, in a bank office that still keeps a pin on a chain. The ring light in the corner cooled with a small, defeated sigh. Somewhere in the new circuitry, a timer hummed. I turned out the retail white and let the dark come back, not because I liked it, but because it was honest. I left the house before the new lights could wake, slid my notes into the inside pocket of the denim jacket, and took the long road that holds the mountains steady on my left. When nerves looked for a place to live, I let them sit in my hands on the wheel and kept my breath slow. 3 steps, I told myself: evidence, conversation, verification. If I said them out loud, they might come true. The barbecue place by the farmer's market smells like oak smoke and pepper, and the tabletops are scarred with a decade of elbows. I chose a booth where the light stayed kind, and I could watch the door. Ethan arrived first, tension riding high in his shoulders. Sloane was a beat behind, radiant the way a storefront is radiant, her phone ghosting a glow across her fingers. I decided to keep my voice even, like setting a chisel before the strike. "I need 3 things," I said. "Pause all operational withdrawals. Hand the books to an independent auditor. Unlock the basement. It's a shop, not a set." Sloane smiled with professional warmth. "We're mid-arc, Mike. Audience expectations are sky high. Let's align on experience." Ethan's eyes searched the table. "Maybe we stay flexible for the brand." "Flexibility breaks joints when you ask it to carry load," I said. "We're out past safe span." Sloane leaned in as if confiding. "There's a path that lowers friction. Record a short, heartfelt message for hashtag Modernize Mountain Home, Heritage Meeting Innovation. In exchange, I'll consider a measured audit and a phased studio access." "No video," I said, "no barter." "We'll follow controls, not story beats. If someone signed my name on authorizations I didn't approve, that has criminal edges. I won't let you get near them." For a moment, the only sound was a tray clattering in the kitchen. Ethan rubbed his jaw the way he did when he was a teenager, and a lie tried to grow. "We can keep this in the family," he murmured. "We keep it lawful," I answered. That's the only way families survive business." I paid my side of the check and stood so the conversation would end before it tipped. "Please send the audit handoff list by morning," I said. Sloane's smile cooled. Ethan kept staring at the table where someone had once carved a crooked heart and sanded half of it away. Back home, I did the small, stubborn tasks that make a man feel less alone. I exported logs and printed statements. I took screenshots of trails I suspected would vanish. Inside the file tree, names had shifted to innocuous labels: assets_V2, legacy_archive, and the revision histories were scrubbed down to a shine. It felt like walking into a room where the dust has been erased, but the odor of departure still hangs. My phone buzzed against the desk. A blocked number offered 7 words: "You're touching what you shouldn't touch." The sentence was clean and quiet, the sort of warning that expects you to hear it once. I set the phone face down and clicked off the smart switches Sloane had installed, pulled the plug on the voice assistant, and turned on Nora's brass lamp. Analog light has no interest in listening back. I sharpened a pencil and wrote questions for the bank. Produce wet signature exemplars and compare to digital certificates. List all current powers of attorney. Identify who holds authority to add signers. Provide login histories for the periods around each transfer. I copied my driver's license and the deed to the house. From the drawer, I took Nora's fountain pen, the one that leaks a little when it is glad to be used, and tucked it beside the paperwork like a charm. Banks have a particular stillness. The air smells like paper that has not yet made a promise. My manager, same man who watched Ethan open his first savings account, met me in a glass room with a pen on a chain. I handed over the list and waited. He typed, frowned, printed. "We've got a limited POA on file," he said, palm on the page. "Filed 6 weeks ago. Authorizes Ethan Carver to approve marketing and CSR disbursements on your behalf." "I didn't grant that," I said. He slid me the signatures. The digital certificate bore my name. The 2-factor challenge on record matched a hardware token we had registered years back, a belt and suspenders move I'd made after a contractor got sloppy. "This passed our checks," he said softly. "That token lives in my home safe," I said. He cleared his throat. "Access logs show a validation from your token the same Sunday your family hosted that charity night. If someone copied the key to your safe, the audit trail would still look clean." He paused. We can freeze CSR disbursements pending a fraud review. We'll flag your profile and require in-person for any authority changes. I'll note your dispute and give you written confirmation. I signed for the freeze with Nora's pen, felt the nib catch and release like a small, grateful sigh. While he made copies, the memory came back whole. Strangers carrying trays into my kitchen, laughter, the ring light warm against the ceiling, me stepping away to fetch more forks, the hallway briefly empty. Trust doesn't squeak when it's being pocketed. It disappears silently and leaves you holding the handle to a door that no longer guards anything. On the sidewalk outside, the envelope weighed more than paper should. The day had thinned to the color of unvarnished pine. People passed in purposeful lines. Evidence, conversation, verification. I had held up my end of the words. Now I needed a craftsperson for a different material. I called a number I'd been given years ago by a client who survived a partner's creative accounting. The attorney's assistant promised a slot the next afternoon. A second call to a forensic accountant got me a meeting under the harmless pretense of pricing a library build-out. No fury rode with me to the car, just the steadiness carpentry teaches. Measure twice, cut once, brace what bears weight. At home, I set the envelope on the workbench I keep stubbornly in the garage, the only square footage Sloan hadn't optimized. On a hook above, Nora's mallet hung where she left it after tapping in the last drawbar on our table. I slid the mallet down and set it atop the documents. The maple head fit my palm the way honesty fits a man's mouth when he chooses it. I turned off the house one switch at a time, not to hide, but to strip away the new noise. Tomorrow would bring forms and sworn statements and strangers who ask clean questions. Tonight belonged to the quiet arithmetic of promises kept. If you're with me and this part hit you hard, type number 1 below to show you're still following along. The journey only gets more intense from here. June Park's office sits over a bakery that smells like mornings I can trust. Rain ticked against the old sash window while I laid the bank envelope on her desk the way a man lays a straight edge, carefully, so nothing slips. June reads like a carpenter measures. Her eyes travel once for shape, twice for truth. I gave her the short version and then the long, the transfers to Blue Ridge Heritage, the DocuSign that isn't my hand, the limited power of attorney filed on a Sunday that swallowed my cell signal, the freeze the bank granted, the basement turned studio with a lock I didn't set. She took notes in a tight script, a list that kept its back straight. 3 tracks, she said. Preserve evidence, escalate a forensic review, prepare injunctive relief in case anyone touches the scene. She told me to stop arguing in public and stop signing anything that contains the words brand, content, or adjustment. She preferred paper and photographs to clouds and links. Use analog where you can, she said. If they're rewriting the story, we work in ink. On my way out, she handed me a simple inventory sheet for the studio, lights, mics, routers, drives, and asked for timestamps, serial numbers, and the last person I saw handling each. I promised a list by night. Promises matter when your name has started appearing in fonts you did not choose. The house had learned new noises in my absence, fans that hissed, dimmers that whispered. Before I reached the living room, Sloane's voice arrived, crisp as a sales jingle. She was streaming a tour of our modern mountain makeover, gliding a camera past the bleached floor and the knot fireplace, calling the old hearth heavy and legacy clutter, explaining to strangers how light and line had finally been freed. Ethan stood out of frame, nodding with a smile that looked rented. The ring light made a white halo on the ceiling where soot once lived. I did not announce myself. I crossed to the mesh tower she'd mounted by the console and pulled the plug, the way you pull a nail that has no business in good wood. The feed died. The room exhaled. For 1 second, there was only the rain working the gutters. Sabotage, Sloane said, bright voice gone to glass. Unsafe behavior. We have partners watching. This is my house, I said, and I kept it plain. Stop filming. Leave the basement as is. An independent auditor will document the equipment. Ethan stepped forward, palms out, the mediator again. Dad, let's keep things smooth for the Brands. You keep them lawful, I said, smooth cracks underweight. Her thumb danced on her phone. I'm calling the sheriff, she said, eyes on me like I was a stain she could still lift. There are safety issues and concerning mental changes. I did not answer. I stood where the hearth used to be and counted heartbeats until they landed in a workable rhythm. When the cruiser lights mapped red and blue across the wall, I met the deputy at the door. He knew me from the library build we did years back. His posture softened a degree. Inside, the house performed its new brightness. Sloan showed him the unplugged hardware like a broken bone. I offered my license, the bank's freeze letter, a typed list of the devices that had appeared in my home without a permit, and the date I had requested an audit. I pulled the plug to reduce fire risk, I said. No surge protection, no permit, and a live show. I'll comply with anything you write. Sloan tilted toward him. He's been confused, forgetting conversations, mixing dates. Today he disabled critical systems. The deputy's pen paused above his pad. He asked me the day, the month, the address, the name of the street I was born on. I answered with the patience you keep for splinters in little fingers. I named the brand of the panel on the wall, the number of outlets on the strip Sloan had overloaded, and the last date the chimney flue had been cleaned, back when there was still a flue. I saw his shoulders decide. He wrote an advisory about household disputes and recommended we resolve access through civil channels and counsel. He took a statement, noted my documentation, and, because he is a man who remembers, asked after the walnut table. I said it was holding. The house grew quiet when the door shut behind him, quiet and sharp around the edges. Sloan moved close enough for her perfume to cut through paint and rain. In a story war, she whispered, whoever owns the camera owns the truth. I let the words settle like sawdust. You don't blow away because it tells you where the cut went. Cameras can rent attention. They cannot own truth if you build it correctly. But truth takes longer to cure. I walked to the panel by the pantry and shut down the smart switches she had grafted onto our circuits. I turned off the voice box that waits for commands. In the garage, I found the old camcorder in a drawer with Christmas lights and a tangle of extension cords, and I mounted it high where it would see comings and goings without needing anyone's network. Its tape whirred like a small, loyal motorboat. I opened a cloth-bound notebook and wrote the date, the weather, who entered and left, what they carried, where they put it down. The ink bled a little, which is how you know it's not pretending to be anything else. 2 calls before dusk, one to a forensic accountant under the polite disguise of a man pricing a built-in library, one to Dr. Leon Patel for a cognitive workup, and chart note that says what it needs to say in the language courts understand. The first will measure money, the second will measure fog and find none. Both will be written in numbers and nouns, not adjectives. Night came blue and mean against the windows. I climbed the stairs and returned Nora's guitar to plumb beneath the patch of wall where the neon had hung. A guitar asks to be true to its own geometry. It will not sing right if you hang it crooked. My fingers brushed dust off the headstock. I stood in the absence where a fire used to breathe and listened to the room. You can hear when a house is holding its breath. You can hear when it starts learning to breathe another way. June had said to work in ink. The deputy had said to work through channels. The rain said nothing at all, which is the oldest counsel. I wrote one more sentence in the notebook. No more speeches. Paper, photos, signatures, time. Then I capped the pen, set it beside the mallet on the bench, and let the dark fill the new white edges until they remembered how to belong tonight. I sat at the walnut table until the grain stopped swimming and chose a line for me to follow. June's notes lay square, the deputy's card clipped to the freeze letter, and my own handwriting in the margins like a metronome set to slow. 2 roads had been arguing in my chest since the cruiser left. Keep the surface calm and let rot work in the dark, or step into the light of procedure and risk losing the only son I have. Wood tells you what happens when you push against its nature, go with the grain and it strengthens, cross it and you splinter both. I wrote one sentence on a blank page and underlined it twice. I will choose the truth. That meant no more bargaining with vocabulary, no more participating in content, no more speeches into cameras that shorten what cannot be shortened. It meant ink, timestamps, signatures, bodies in rooms, and doors that close behind witnesses. It meant protecting the thing you can't replace, dignity, and the things you can barely repair, reputation, safety, the steadiness of a child's life that should never be minted into episodes. The plan divided itself neatly, the way a board yields to a well-set blade. Quiet work first. I labeled a fresh cassette and set the camcorder's angle to read the garage door and basement steps. I opened the cloth-bound notebook and drew a margin rule, then began entries in a carpenter's hand, time in, time out, who moved, who carried, where placed, notes on dust patterns and new chords. I exported files to 2 thumb drives, pocketed one, and sealed the other in a paper sleeve for a place away from this house. The public-facing side came next, sparing and factual. I printed the bank's freeze confirmation, stapled it to a short letter requesting that no CSR-related disbursements be authorized without in-person verification. I drafted a notice to company email stating that an independent audit would begin and that all equipment in the basement must remain undisturbed pending documentation. I paused before each verb to sand it smooth of drama. Paper does not need adjectives to stand. Appointments slotted into the frame. The forensic accountant would arrive to price a library, but would really be counting serial numbers, photographing screws and scratches, logging the make and model of every light and drive. Dr. Leon Patel would run the cognition battery and translate patience into chart language no rumor can twist. June would pull the list of gear into a formal application for a temporary restraining order if anyone decided to get imaginative with inventory. Before I left, I made 2 envelopes. In the first, I placed copies of the freeze, the audit trail, the inventory starter, photographs of the basement door and the studio racks, and a short affidavit of what I had observed under my own roof. In the second, I repeated the set. I drove to Quinn's school and waited until the hallway rang with the end of a lesson. Her teacher met me by the door with marker ink on her fingers and compassion in her eyes I hadn't asked for. I explained the envelope like a fire drill. If you can't reach me and a woman named June Park calls, please hand her this. She nodded once and said, I can do that. I thanked her and walked out into air that tasted like rain on tin. On the way home, I thought about Ethan with a kind of ache that has weight. There are debts you can pay with money, and there are debts you pay with nights you don't sleep. If he had signed what I feared, he would need a road back that did not go through lies. At the desk, I wrote a letter, slow, each word a nail that had deceit flush. You can tell the whole truth. I will walk beside you to the courthouse door. The law is the only carpenter big enough for this repair. I folded it and set it in the drawer he rated at 10 for extra birthday candles. The company files waited like a test I had proctored for others but never taken myself. Ethan had added 2 advisory seats to the board. I pulled bylaws, share classes, quorum rules, and proxy language, then marked the parts that let me delay any change in authority until the audit's completion. I built a short agenda for the meeting I would call. 5 minutes, 3 documents, 0 grandstanding. In the margins I wrote, show paper, ask for minutes, leave. Security had to come down to iron and key. I pulled every smart plug off the wall and tossed them in a cardboard box with their cheerful manuals. I swapped a deadbolt on the garage for a mechanical one, screwed a hasp over the basement door, and put original documents in a small safe at Carl's shop, where a dog with old eyes sleeps in the sawdust and barks at nothing because sometimes nothing is a someone who came quietly. I left a note on the kitchen counter for myself. No one enters alone when you're out. Only then did I call my son. I'll be working with an independent auditor, the bank and counsel, I said. There will be no videos. Access stays as is until review. Meet me at the office on Thursday. He breathed, and for a moment I heard the boy who once tested echoes under bridges. Okay, he said. The line went soft. Dr. Patel's office smelled like fresh paper and lemon soap, an honest combination. I gave the abbreviated history, then answered every square on his exam like a man paying a bill he understood. Date, city, serial sevens, a clock face that looked like it could hold time. He wrote neatly, asked a handful of questions about mood and sleep, and concluded in the tidy voice of medicine that there was no cognitive impairment. "I'll send a signed summary," he said. "Use it if you need it." "I will," I answered. The library client came late afternoon in a flannel shirt and the kind of hands that remember numbers. We walked the basement slowly, saying nothing that would wake the wrong ears, while his phone made inaudible notes. Model numbers, dust rings, thumbprints of heat baked into paint. He bagged nothing. He moved nothing. He recorded the fact that everything remained. When he shook my hand by the garage, his eyes said what professionals say without words: "Keep it that way." That night, the mountain air came through the window in a sliver that smelled like rain moving over rock. I opened the notebook and wrote 2 words: "No performances." I slid a duplicate envelope under Nora's mallet so it pressed the flap closed like a witness. The house held still around me, and I felt the line I had chosen become a groove a man could plane to. Tomorrow would bring meetings and signatures. Tonight I practiced the only oath that matters. I will not lie, not even to make peace. The conference room at Carver Timberworks has a table I built in the year the roof leaked and hope didn't. Coffee lived in the air with the old smell of glue. I set a thick envelope in the center and watched it land like a plumb bob finding true. June Park sat to my left, neat as a chalk line. Across from us, Ethan with a jaw he couldn't unclench, Sloan with a face tuned for the lens, and 2 advisors whose suits had never met grit. June clicked on a small recorder. "We'll keep minutes," she said. "Please anchor statements to documents." I nodded once. Talking wasn't going to carry weight here. Paper would. I laid out the first layer. Bank statements showing 6 months of steady transfers to Blue Ridge Heritage Fund, memos that said CSR, community, outreach, and nothing behind them. Audit trails with approval stamped, DocuSign by MC at hours. I was outside reception and IP blocks 2 streets from my porch. Then the bank letter acknowledging a limited power of attorney filed on a Sunday with 2-factor authentication traced to my hardware token. The token was stored at my home, I said. Access logs matched the night we hosted that charity event. Sloan smiled a public smile. "Modern governance," she said. "Streamlined disbursements, audience-facing initiatives." Mike consented to strategy. June tapped the page. "We're talking signatures and authority, not strategy." I put down the next document. It was heavier because houses are heavy. A credit file with my address in the collateral line, Ethan's pen on the promissory signature, cross-default provisions that pull everything under if one thing falls. An email from the agency encouraging speed. I didn't say a word. I let the clauses do the talking. Color left Ethan's face. He reached for the paper like he might warm his hands on it. Sloan's voice climbed into jargon. Capital structure, brand surety, unlocking value. But the 2 advisors had turned toward June's copy of the bank confirmation like moths deciding the porch light is not for them after all. "Third set," I said. Photographs, serial plates on lights and drives, a floor plan of the basement-turned studio, and stills from an old camcorder mounted over my garage door. People in black carrying a small hard case past the hallway photograph wall. Time code, the bank's internal note, safe access logged at the same time. Sloan's laugh was quick and brittle. "Dramatic, Mike." "Staged. He's been showing decline, forgetting dates, fixating on smells. It's sad." June slid 2 items forward without heat. The deputy's field report from the day she called the sheriff, noting orientation intact, and my description of overloading on a non-permitted circuit. Dr. Patel's signed summary. No cognitive impairment. Allegations of confusion are contradicted by contemporaneous medical and law enforcement records, June said. Let's stay with the facts. I watched the advisors recalculate their chairs by an inch. June continued, voice like a level reading. We had filed to freeze any spending outside operating budget, to preserve and inventory all studio equipment, to give notice that destruction or removal could incur sanctions. She read the statute number without flourish. Even the paper seemed to sit up straighter. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and gave a single nod. Limited order granted. Property preservation and records hold. Officers and a forensic team are en route to secure the basement. The words altered the room's pressure. For Sloane, the camera in her head lost its shot list. For Ethan, the floor tilted toward what gravity had wanted all along. We ended the meeting because meetings end when documents have done their work. Outside, rain stitched the lot. Inside, the building remembered every nail I'd set. As we reached the door, Ethan's hand brushed my sleeve. "Dad," he said, barely a voice, "I thought I could manage it." "Tomorrow," I said, "you come with me." It was all I could offer without letting anger run the saw. By the time we reached the house, red and blue were bouncing on the new white walls. The basement door wore caution tape, and a travel case stack moved like careful furniture. An officer read out serials while the forensic tech called them back. Router, drives, battery packs. The camcorder overhead pointed its square eye at the scene and kept its own counsel. Across the screen I couldn't see, the story people liked to tell about us began to lose grip, because seals and signatures were writing a different script. Phones heat a pocket when a life tilts. June's chimed with confirmation after confirmation. A brand paused its collaboration pending clarity. One advisor emailed to suspend participation. The other asked for indemnification language and didn't get it. Sloane stood in the far corner watching the tape cross itself in neat X's. Her gaze flicked to the dead ring light, then to the officer signing chain of custody forms. A woman built for angles had run out of them. At dusk, when the last clipboard closed and the last photograph flashed, the house felt empty of noise it had never needed. The tape on the basement looked like stitches after a necessary surgery. June left with a box of copies and her pen capped. I stood on the porch as the cruisers rolled slow down the hill. Gravel whispered. Ethan's truck eased in and went quiet. He climbed the steps and didn't seem to know what to do with his hands. He has my hands, strong enough to lift a beam, clumsy enough to drop a sorry at the wrong time. He knelt. Not the showy kind, the kind a man does when the spine won't hold one more minute. "I thought I could keep it safe," he said. "I thought I could fix it before you noticed." There are speeches a father rehearses and never gives. I stood him up with a grip under the elbow like I used when he fell off the creek rock at 8. "Tomorrow," I said again, "you come with me." We listened to the last of the rain work the gutter. A seal fluttered on the basement door and held. Inside, the conference room minutes would become a file. The bank letter would live with the others. The camcorder would keep turning its small circle of tape. Outside, the ridge put its shoulder back under the sky. Consequences had arrived wearing badges and dates. Forgiveness wasn't in uniform and wouldn't be for some time. But the bridge between us, racked and smoking, hadn't fallen into the ravine. Not yet. I could still feel it underfoot, narrow, rough, but load-bearing if we crossed it one careful board at a time. Morning came without performance. The caution tape on the basement door lifted and fell with the furnace's breath, a stitched wound learning not to pull. I made coffee strong enough to push back paint smell and read the impound receipt twice, the way you read a prescription you intend to follow exactly. The house was quieter. Even the new white walls seemed to dim a stop, as if the night had taught them something about humility. I laid Nora's fountain pen beside a stack of clean forms like a ceremonial tool. Ethan arrived on time, face gray from sleep he hadn't earned. June Park sat up at the walnut table with the tidy gravity of a notary at a wedding. We didn't say much. She slid the affidavit across the grain. Ethan read with his jaw locked, then unclenched it and signed. He signed the credential list. He signed the consent to pull device histories and bank metadata. He handed over passwords with the look of a man unsaddling a horse after riding it too hard in the wrong direction. June initialed each page and spoke only what the record needed. We took the elevator at the bank because stairs felt like ceremony, and I'd had enough of those. The manager met us with a legal pad and the caution you reserve for damaged machinery. June argued the law like a level reeds plumb, the limited POA tainted by token misuse, the misleading stream of CSR transfers, the cross-default mortgage pulled through an instrument prepared under false color. Ethan's affidavit sat on top like a weight. I added what a house can add: years, taxes paid, single name on the deed. "We're asking you to treat the mortgage as void for fraud in the execution," June said. The manager copied pages, excused himself, returned with a supervisor, and a sympathetic caution. They agreed to flag the account, suspend collection actions, and forward the package to internal investigations with a fraud designation. It wasn't victory, but the ground under my feet felt less hollow. Back at the shop, I set the phone on a crate and recorded 1 minute of wood and truth. No cuts, no graphics. The camera watched a bench plane travel the face of a poplar board while my voice explained what our hands believe. We are cooperating with an independent audit. We are working with the bank and authorities. Our obligations to customers and crew remain our first duties. No names, no blame, no performance. Just the long, even ribbon of a shaving curling away like a promise kept. When I posted it on the shop page, the comments felt like steady hands on a beam. Suppliers saying they were with us, customers saying they'd wait as long as it took. June's phone buzzed while I swept. The district attorney's office wanted me as a primary witness in a case that now had names: fraud, elder exploitation, laundering. I said yes with a condition. Recovered money should first pay small vendors and wages owed. After that, a slice for a scholarship in Nora's name to teach older hands a new trade. "We can recommend restitution priorities," June said. "No guarantees." "Write it anyway," I said. Sometimes paper makes promises courageous people later honor. There is dignity in removing a bad idea. I took the neon speech bubble off the wall with a screwdriver and a small prayer not to tear the plaster. Behind it, the paint looked younger, less sure of itself. I hung Nora's guitar on a proper hook and tuned it slowly. The room brightened in a way no bulb manages. When I strummed a G, the note met the window glass and returned softer, like the house remembering a word it hadn't used in a while. Ethan and I drafted a 90-day plan with the discipline of a rehab schedule. Keep every existing contract upright. Freeze marketing. Publish one weekly update for the crew and vendors. Thursday nights, open the shop for a free skills class. Simple joints, safe tool use, finishing that doesn't lie, dedicated to Nora. We listed local suppliers who had been strung along and put them first in line for payment as funds came home. We scheduled weekly calls with the bank and the forensic team and a monthly check-in with June so nobody tried to outrun the process. The twist arrived on a screen we didn't own. From a phone seized at the studio, detectives had scraped a note. Prop list: create saw stall for behind-the-scenes day. It included a timestamp that matched a calendar reminder Sloan had labeled BTS Shop Energy. I read it twice. My hands got cold in a way that had nothing to do with weather. Money is a mess you can mop up. Injury is a stain that doesn't lift. June added personal safety language to her to-do list and filed for a temporary protective order before I had finished one breath. I picked up Quinn after school. The routine steadied both of us. Backpack, art folder, a leaf pressed in wax paper. "Are we okay, Grandpa?" she asked. "The grown-ups are fixing things the grown-up way," I said. "You're safe." I promised her teacher we would not film, post, or otherwise perform any part of this family, least of all the parts with children in them. The teacher nodded like someone hearing water find the right channel. Back at the shop, I wrote a letter to the crew and a separate one to our partners. Short, plain, signed with the pen that leaks when it's happy. We were under audit. Wages and existing contracts would be honored. All media inquiries should go to counsel. Our only official updates would come from the office. I read it aloud once to hear if any sentence tried to sell. None did. I sent it and felt the building breathe. Night fell in a clean band. I clamped the poplar to the bench, checked the iron for square, and pushed the plane until a steady ribbon lifted, a sound like calm deciding to stay. Ethan stood at the end with a rule, calling out thickness without commentary. The silence between us changed temperature. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold. It was serviceable, like a truce you build so you can work safely in the same room. In the cloth-bound log, I wrote appointments in a line. D.A., Tuesday 10 a.m., bank, Thursday 9, forensic ongoing, shop class, starts next week. I added a note to bring the mallet Nora liked for drawbores and placed the fountain pen on the page as if it could seal a seam. The house around us felt less staged. Even the caution tape looked less like a wound and more like a stitch you don't rush to clip. From here on, the schedule would be kept by paper, the pace by the sound of a plane, and the truth by hands that work until the board lies flat. The county courthouse smelled like floor wax and paper that hadn't learned a story yet. Morning light found a way through tall windows and cut the room into clean sections. I sat in the first row with June on my left and Ethan on my right, his knee a metronome, until he caught himself and flattened his palms against his trousers. I kept my hand on the cloth-bound log like a quiet oath. When the clerk called the docket, the room settled into the kind of listening that makes even the air behave. The prosecutor stood and built a frame out of dates and stubs, 6 months of transfers labeled community outreach with no invoices behind them. A Sunday filing of a limited power of attorney authenticated through a token taken from a private safe. Digital signatures rendered in my name that did not match the way my hand pulls an R. He advanced the timeline to the camera in my garage catching carriers at the hour the bank recorded the safe opening, and to the studio devices that gave up their serial numbers like witness badges. The words were the words of law, but what I heard was weight. How many pounds a house bears when the wrong nails are used. June guided the court through what had followed. The bank's freeze turned preservation, the audit inventory, the medical summary declaring my mind intact, the deputy's notes from the day our power cords learned a new word for caution. She argued the POA and DocuSign authorizations were void for fraud in the execution, that the mortgage using my home as collateral rode that same poison stream. When she finished, the judge leaned in, fingers tinted, and asked 2 narrow questions. The answers lived in exhibits that did not flinch. Orders came one measured sentence at a time. The limited POA and associated electronic authorizations were nullified as products of deception. The mortgage on my house was voided. The clerk was directed to strike the lien from the property record. The freeze remained, but its purpose changed. Funds would sit in a monitored account for restitution. A protective order grew teeth in time, forbidding approach or contact in every form. Words stamped the page, and I felt something unhook in my chest that had been clinging there since the night the porch light forgot me. Money is not a person, but it does have destinations. The judge approved a distribution plan that started close to the floor. Local suppliers and wages first, then, when recovery allowed, a scholarship fund in Nora's name for older workers learning a new cut. The forensic team's report predicted 68% recovery within 90 days, which felt like a rough board sanded smooth enough to take finish. I thought of the men who flood our parking lot at dawn with thermoses and jokes and backs that have lifted whole kitchens. The court had said their pay came first. It landed like a brace under a long span. When it was her turn, Sloan looked smaller than the room. A plea was read. She admitted to a pattern the documents had already told. Fraudulent authorizations, misuse of authority, structured withdrawals that pretended to be goodwill, obstruction by performance. The note about a saw stall laid weight where the court could not ignore it. The agreement required confinement, restitution, and a ban from managing financial or media operations for a term that will outlast trends. I watched no faces, not even hers. Justice is better read than watched. The agency that helped sell the newness stepped forward next in the papers. The court ordered data surrendered, profits disgorged, and cooperation under penalty for evasion. The two advisors who had warmed our conference chairs accepted their part in a softer register, assistance in unwinding deals, sworn statements, a brisk exit from our business. The bank's counsel stood and promised an internal review of how a Sunday filing walked past their sense of smell. The judge encouraged the promise into a protocol. Ethan rose when called and read the statement he and June had polished until the sentences could stand by themselves. He accepted that he'd signed what his authority did not permit, confessed ambition and fear in equal weights, and asked to put his hands where repair lives. The court gave him community service that was not theater, teaching Thursday night classes at the shop, and ordered a year of supervised management with 2 signatures required on any marketing or CSR spending. Accountability handed him a tool. I hoped he would learn its balance. When the gavel rested, the room lifted a fraction. Outside, the corridor smell changed from wax to rain. June summarized the orders for me in the same even voice she had used to make them happen. The clerk's stamp thudded through the wall like a steady heart. I signed where the page asked and felt the pen catch ever so slightly on the fiber before the line went true. By afternoon, we were back under our own roof. A deputy peeled the last of the caution tape from the basement door, and a rectangle of adhesive shadow stayed, a small scar the house could carry without apology. June left us with copies sorted into a box that did not rattle. We ate sandwiches at the walnut table because families should eat after court. Ethan placed a new safe key on the table and slid it toward me like a confession. 2 signatures, Dad, he said. Always. I nodded once. You don't hug a man with a fresh cast. You show him where the supports are until he can put weight on himself. I spent an hour removing the last of the smart switches and fitting mechanical locks where cameras had once asked to listen. We brought down the shoebox of family photos that had been living in a closet since stages took over the walls. Glass found wood again, faces found rooms. Nora's guitar held its tuning, the house exhaled a little, and I believed it would learn to breathe like itself again. The 90-day plan stepped off paper into motion. Accounts payable to local mills went out with checks that didn't need apologies attached. The shop class filled so fast we added stools and laid out extra chisels. Old hands showed up with calluses and stories and a patience that refused to be filmed. The bank confirmed that foreclosure proceedings were dead letters pending the end of their own inquiry. A customer we had built for when Ethan was still in braces sent a note that said only, "We're with you," and attached a deposit for a library that will smell like cherry in winter. At night, I wrote in the cloth-bound log, "House kept, debts begun." Thursday class, full. I set Nora's mallet across the open page and turned off the lamp. Beyond the glass, the ridge held its dark shape without asking for an audience. What remains after paper and officers and pens is not triumph, it is orientation. A room set square, a beam under load, a name not spoken into a lens but written where it belongs. We had paid a price and would pay more, but the structure was standing, and the story was back in our own mouths, told softly to those who had earned the right to hear it. Dawn showed up without an audience, the way good things often do. I opened the kitchen window and let the mountains slide into the room in bands of blue and pine. The house breathed wood again. Coffee rose in a quiet column, and from the shop I could hear the smallest hum, the plane whispering along a test board because I'd left it set last night to see if the iron would hold its edge. On the walnut table, I laid the cloth-bound log and Nora's fountain pen side by side like tools you trust more than talent. I have learned that a life holds when you work the grain you're given. The arc from trouble to order wasn't a miracle. It was a sequence. Gather evidence. Submit to procedure. Do the next repair. Boundaries mattered more than eloquence. What I signed, what I refused, what required 2 names in ink. A family isn't a channel. It is a ledger of kept promises. We had been tempted to turn living into content. I know now, you don't narrate your way out of a fire. You shut off the gas and call the inspector. Truth moves slowly, but it is a thing you can carry. It lives in minutes and receipts, in a deputy's field note and a doctor's signature, in the impression a pen leaves on paper when the nib catches and then goes true. A camera can rent attention, not own reality. When the room asked me to choose between a script and a record, I picked the record and discovered it weighs less in your hand over distance. There is no poetry in betrayal, especially when it uses your child's face to walk through your door. I am not romantic about forgiveness. Ethan sits across from me most mornings now, and we run the numbers twice. He signs where he must sign, and I sign beside him, not because reconciliation is a sentiment, but because accountability learned a habit. Our trust is not a speech, it is a routine. Bank calls on Thursdays, reconciliations on Tuesdays, shop class every Thursday night where humility is the only tuition we charge. Quinn asked me if we were going to be on any more videos. No, I said, and the word felt like oak. Our rule is written on a scrap by the phone. No filming children, no posting our life, no trading privacy for reach. The world can have our chairs and our shelves and our best joints. It cannot have our kitchen. Some rooms belong to silence if they are going to be strong. I used to think aging meant shrinking your circle. I know now that aging well means tending your standards. 2 signatures on sensitive spending. Paper backups for the cloud. Review every POA, kill anything you don't understand. Analog locks where memory lives. Learn enough of the digital to know where not to stand. If you are over 60 and still holding a shop or a business, let this old fool tell you, update your fences, not your ethics. The law taught me a few plainer lines. A power of attorney is a tool only if the hand that grants it understands the cut. DocuSign is an instrument, not a spell. It requires a chain that can be checked. Community funds demand invoices with faces and work attached. If a studio moves into a house, the house deserves permits and fire protection. Art is not an exemption. Craft that refuses the rules becomes a con. We finished stripping the last of the smart in favor of what is simply careful. The 90-day plan turned into habit. Weekly updates posted on paper, monthly audits with minutes, a quarterly meeting with chairs that squeak and a pot of coffee that doesn't. Above the shop door, I screwed in a small board, letters burned clean. No lies, no hurry, no cameras. Visitors smile when they read it, and the crew taps it lightly going out, the way ball players pat a sign, not for luck, but for alignment. Sometimes I pick up Nora's mallet and remember the way she'd set a joint with 3 gentle taps. Let the grain be the grain, she'd say, meaning don't fight the truth of a thing to please a crowd. It has become a doctrine. I won't polish a story past recognition, not for sales, not for sympathy. The right customers do not require a costume. They ask if the shelf will stay square in February, and we answer with joinery. Trust, like finish, returns by layers. A mill we owe sent a note. Ship when ready. We'll wait. The Thursday class filled with hands that have built other lives, laid brick, stitched leather, fixed engines, and wanted the music of a perfect shaving curling from a plane's mouth. Folks left with joints that weren't quite pretty yet but were honest, and sometimes that's prettier than perfect. I posted a single update that said only, "We continue paying and working." No adjectives. The response felt like a steadying palm on the beam. We have chosen a smaller horizon on purpose. Carver Timberworks will grow the way trees do, rings you don't see until years make them obvious. Ethan manages operations under the rule he agreed to. No marketing or outreach spins without 2 signatures and a receipt that names a human. We wrote down ethical KPIs and taped them inside the supply closet where nobody performs for them. A year from now, if he meets them, we'll discuss lifting the supervision. Until then, the meter of our progress is simple. Delivered on time, safe, paid. This morning, I put the new safe key and Nora's pin into the desk drawer that sticks because I haven't planned the runners since spring. I pulled down the old shoebox and returned photographs to the wall. Weddings, sawdust baptisms, a boy with 2 large goggles holding the wrong end of a measuring tape. The guitar above the couch kept its tune. When I strummed a G, the house answered in its old pitch. A man is not the speeches others make about him. He is the map of his kept appointments and the list of the bills he paid first. I wrote a last line in the log and let the ink spread a little into the paper. A home is a collection of promises kept. Then I closed the book and left it on the table, the pen resting across it like a plank across two sawhorses. In the shop, the plane lifted a long, light ribbon as if the board had been waiting for this exact morning. I set the shaving in my palm and held it up to the window. The mountain stood where it has always stood, indifferent to narratives, faithful to shape. The blade whispered again and the ribbon curled over my knuckles, thin as grace, strong as restraint. That sound, the simple sentence of wood made true, is what we live by now. It reports to no lens, it answers to the square and the scale and the hand that refuses shortcuts. And it will keep answering as long as I do. Thank you for spending this time with us. If something in this journey spoke to you about boundaries, truth, or rebuilding, share your thoughts below so others can learn from your perspective. If the story helped, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss what comes next. We read every comment, and your voice genuinely shapes future stories. So add your take, recommend a topic you'd like explored, and let's keep building this community together. Your presence here matters.